Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Sirhan on X, coming to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful 6th of May of the calendar year 2025. Glad to be back home after a nice little trip over to the other side of Cincinnati last night to get a feel for what the history of this city was over at Ezra Charles Park, because it was 80 years ago yesterday that a historical event took place out there. And when I got a chance to witness it, I got a chance to feel the history of it, see all the explorations of what Ezra Charles meant to Cincinnati. And that's why I've always said, and I got a chance to validate it by my own two eyes, why he's the number one icon when it comes to the history of the sports of city of Cincinnati. So I'm glad to be back home in the friendly confines of my own studio. Let's go ahead and get right down to it. Of course, the news that broke yesterday out of Baltimore that the Baltimore Ravens decided to part ways with their kicker, Justin Tucker. I think everybody knows all the reasons for it, the allegations. I won't use the platform for it. Football wise, he sort of hit the downturn in the last couple seasons. And I think last season really started to hit the downturn because those kicks that were so automatic for him in the past started to come up short of misses. I don't know what the reasons were, but it was time for them probably to head to another direction. They drafted Tyler Loop, and they got another kicker undrafted to be their backup. So you had a feeling the writing was on the wall in Baltimore for Justin Tucker. So this move was coming. The Ravens general manager, Eric DeCosta, tried to proclaim it as the equivalent of a football move. Of course, it's always up for debate given what he has going on in Baltimore with the allegations. I won't elaborate on it because I don't know the details enough. It's just basically a bunch of women saying, I got harassed by Justin Tucker and masseuses, the same stuff we heard with the Sean Watson in Cleveland. But it was probably time anyways, because in the last couple of years, he's sort of fallen off the map when he was widely regarded as the best kicker in the NFL, head and shoulders above everybody else. And last season sort of fell off the map. Whether the allegations got to him, I don't know. But it was time probably for a new direction, and that's where the Baltimore Ravens are going to be headed. So I'm sure they're going to be fine. They're probably going to focus more on getting the end zone more because they don't have a reliable kicker like Justin Tucker for the longest time. Of course, he wasn't as reliable the last two seasons. So we're going to see the direction where it goes in the upcoming NFL season. And some cool news, and this is something that might interest yours truly being one of them. The NFL 2027 draft is slated to take place at National Mall in Washington, D.C., where, of course, the White House is the big, beautiful area where they do a bunch of conventions over there. Of course, we have a bunch of people in the NFL community with their panties all up in the bunch because Commissioner Roger Goodell was standing side by side with President Donald Trump. And we have fan bases and fans all over and media people all over the NFL community who have their panties all up in a bunch because of that particular reason. First of all, everybody shut up because Roger Goodell wanted it. President Trump wanted it. Goodell and Trump don't see eye to eye on many things, but they came together to put this thing, and make this announcement to take place at National Mall on the year of 2027, which I and my show is going to aim to be there within the next 2 years. But can everybody please just shut up when it comes to what the particulars of this are? I mean, I get it. The political aspect drives the world apart. Has people have their panties all up in a bunch for stupid reasons. But everybody needs to just shut up. The thing is done. The 2027 NFL draft will take place in the National Mall in Washington, D.C. on the nation's capital. I will be there. So is my show. I'm going to be working toward it, trying to get credentialed for it. I'm looking forward to be a part of this historic event. Everyone just needed to quit having their panties all up in the bunch because someone was having a picture next to Donald Trump. I mean, the people in that other areas had the same thing when they were having pictures taken with other the University of Michigan has now decided to take matters into its own hands and suspend their head coach, Sherrod Moore, 2 games for all the crap that's been going on with recruiting violations. Here's the thing. It's not a good look. Everybody knows what happened with Michigan's national title run, what happened with Michigan's championship run, whatever you want to call it, what they did during that time. Of course, it's also announced that President Santa Ono went from the University of Michigan to the University of Florida in a similar role. Of course, they had this self-imposed suspensions of a couple assistants show cause hearings or whatever you want to call it for a year or 2. I never seen a program so quick to leave to where you think the road runner would feel slow running from Wile E. Coyote, because that's how fast these people from Michigan are leaving. I mean, talk about show cause hearing here, show cause hearing here. Of course, Santa Ono leaving from Michigan to Florida, that doesn't help the cause, but it is what it is at the end of the day. Because what happened was when you had this, all these allegations come up, and now that the NCAA is going to be one to come and impose theirs here soon, Michigan is trying to do the fastest cover up so fast, not even Inspector Gadget could figure it out. I mean, that's how fast they're trying to do this. And you have key pieces leaving University of Michigan so fast, not even the road runner could run from Wile E. Coyote that fast. Beep, beep, I mean, that's how fast Michigan is leaving their program with key pieces. I'm thinking how fast Jim Harbaugh wanted to go to the NFL when he went back to the LA Chargers. Now, Harbaugh was going to go back to the NFL. That's a no-brainer. But think of how fast he's leaving. Think of how fast everybody else is leaving. And think about the fact what is going on here, because simply put, you cannot absolve yourself from what's about to happen. They're doing this because they know what's coming. They're doing this because they don't want any accountability for what happened. And, of course, this whole so-called self-imposed suspension on Sherrod Moore, the head coach, is basically a temporary Band-Aid on a wound that's going to bleed all over the place in Michigan, because it's about to get nasty over the next couple years. We all know this. So good luck with what's going on. The self-imposed suspension, that's not going to happen. You know the NCAA is investigating hard. I know they took the high road when they won the national title a couple years ago, when they did, saying it was the right winner. But everybody knows what's about to happen. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. We'll see what happens. Good luck down the line. The University of Michigan. Damn, I didn't even think I would see the day where I'd be telling people are running faster than the road runner running from Wile E. Coyote. That's what's going on over there, especially at higher levels, at higher key positions. The biggest game of cover-up maybe in college football history. Now to some NBA, and a final salute to the Spurs head coach, Gregg Popovich. Officially announced his retirement yesterday. Now he calls himself EFA or whatever the frick it is, ascending to the role of the president of the team, which I believe he had some stake in that while he was a head coach. The health problems, the stroke or whatever. A pouring admiration throughout the NBA community. But salute to Gregg Popovich for a terrific NBA career. He'll probably do fine in his role. Everywhere he goes, his fingerprints are always going to be on it. Of course, we could talk about all the coaches and assistants that came out of the Pop coaching tree. Maybe the one still is the former player Steve Kerr, the head coach of Golden State. What can you say? For Gregg Popovich, 3-time coach of the year, 5-time NBA champion. Every year during his run he had with Tim Duncan, made the playoffs, which is 19 consecutive seasons. That time there had the number 1 winnings percentage in all the team sports, all 4 major ones. We talk about the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NFL, and NHL. Of course, you have the political views. Not going to talk about it. Y'all can have at it. Y'all can agree or disagree with it. But, of course, the best part about Gregg Popovich is one of the more brilliant minds. When he drafted Tim Duncan in 1997 and eventually added on pieces like Tony Parker in 2001 and Tony Parker in 2001. Then Manu Ginobili came over in 2002 after years of international play when he was drafted 57th overall in 1999. You know about that run there. Between the 4 of them, Duncan, Parker, Ginobili, and Pop, 4 titles in a span of 12 years. Of course, maybe his best job came in the 2014 NBA championship after that difficult loss to Miami the year before on the Ray Allen game-tying three-pointer, which basically was a tap out and a game the Spurs had won. But to come back and stomp the league from start to finish in the 2013-2014 season after that finals loss just shows us how great he was. Maybe his most defining moment in his career, maybe the most satisfying win in the history of that franchise, given what took place the year before in the 2013 finals. So salute to Gregg Popovich, salute to a hell of a coaching career, salute to a lot of things. Good luck in your new role. I'm sure he'll be doing just fine there because as long as his fingerprints are all over the Spurs organization, they're going to go places. It was time for a change more than likely. You could probably say he could have done this a year or two before, but Gregg Popovich just loved coaching in the NBA, loved coaching players. Of course, loves talking to the media. We know how that is. So congratulations to Gregg Popovich on a stellar NBA coaching career. And of course, last night was a wild comeback of all sorts. I don't know if it's because of one team won it or it's because of one team lost it, but I'm going to angle both of these here real quick. It was the New York Knicks coming from 20 down to beat the Boston Celtics in game one. The story actually from the Knicks side was guys stepping up. Actually, when it got to overtime, Mikal Bridges hit basically what turned out to be the game-clinching three and then had the defensive play that stopped Jaylen Brown to get the shot off for a potential game-tying basket as time expired. And, of course, Jalen Brunson did whatever he wanted to. From the Boston angle, 45 missed three-pointers. Somebody explain why you feel the need to take 45 that many three-pointers. If you're missing 45 three-pointers and you're still taking three-pointers, let's just tell you about the IQ level of players like Jason Tatum. Okay? We know it. Jason Tatum rode Jaylen Brown's coattails to the championship last season. Jason Tatum was a play hero. Now he wants to resort to jacking up threes among a bunch of other Celtics players. Crazy thing is, a lot of them were wide open looks. I get it. But if you're missing 45 three-pointers, you would think at some point it would be cut off at a certain time, which never happened. That's where, from the Boston end, you could probably say they lost it, among many others. For the Knicks, they got the steal win on the road. I said there was going to be a 6-game series. I had Boston winning. But this was a weird game, but kudos to the Knicks for after being down 20, just to fight. Big shots here by guys like Jalen Brunson. The breakaway from OG Anunoby and the end one to put the Knicks up in overtime. The wide open three on the left baseline by Mikal Bridges, and then the play at the end by Bridges to stop Jaylen Brown from getting a shot off as time was expiring in overtime. Good road win for the New York Knicks. I think Boston will find a way to get themselves together. Just someone needs to tell them to stop jacking up threes when they're missing them, because you're missing 45 three-pointers in an NBA game. You're basically begging for an L, and I mean begging. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, who do you guys are? The Golden State Warriors of the late 2010s with the Splash Brothers, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. You don't have a shooter remotely half as good as either of them. That says a whole lot. But I think Boston will be fine. They've been here before. But you do have to give the nod to the Knicks. Tip your hat off to them. Great win on the road. And we'll see what happens tomorrow night when they play game 2. Oh, never thought I'd live to see the day where I thought I would say the three-pointer has been abused, because it's been abused a lot in recent years. Sheesh. Not just in the NBA, but maybe at all levels, even college and high school. I mean, it's there for a reason, but at least take quality threes and at least manage the game a lot better. Sheesh. Now to the world of boxing. And karma got a lot of people Friday night. And I mean a massive karma. And I sat back and I had the time of my life with it. This took place at Times Square at Madison Square, outside Madison Square Garden, or outside New York City or wherever. It was a part of that triple header they had with DAZN. The main event was Ryan Garcia versus Rolly Romero. Story of this one is early in the fight, the double left hook by Romero floors Garcia, and Romero just does anything and everything he wants to. He was hoping that the judges would get it right, and credit to the judges. They got it right. The right winner won. Although I thought Romero won every round of that fight. But the karma came to Ryan Garcia and his supporters, because think of what happened last year at this time. He supposedly beat Devin Haney, being beat, but tested positive for Osterin 3 times in a span of a week. He comes back into this fight, doesn't even have anything in the system, and it's just overwhelmed, and I mean overwhelmed by Rolly Romero. And we have idiots in the boxing community who deeply think Austrian has no factor in any kind of a performance. This is Exhibit A as to why it did. Let me get this out of the way real quick so you guys in the community understand it, because a boatload of you guys don't. It's on the banned list for the reason. Whatever he took, he popped dirty for it 3 times. Not once, not twice, 3 times. And a year later, after the 1-year suspension, he comes into this fight, basically nothing on him, against a Rolly Romero who was supposed to be set up because he had the high money rematch with Devin Haney coming up, which we know all the crazy storylines with those two. And Ryan Garcia lays an egg on his return to a character named Rolly Romero. If you guys still think Austrian didn't play a factor in Ryan Garcia beating Devin Haney, let me just tell you guys, first of all, to shut up. You guys need to get off these social media apps, because you guys are a bunch of idiots like Showbiz, Two-Tone Superstar, Ray Jackson, among the many others. Go to the nearest hospital near you. Go get checked for CTE bad. And if they ask why, tell them it's because you don't think Austrian is a PED drug that impacts anybody. Get the result and get them to me. The results of what happened from Ryan Garcia's fight against Devin Haney versus Rolly Romero is the proof in the pudding you guys need. I mean, I don't care if it's this much. I don't care if it's that much. I don't care if it's that much. I don't care if you put as much as in global debt. The point is, it's in a system. He tested positive for it 3 times, and he was hit hard. Actually, should have been hit harder than what he was. He had an attorney to negotiate his punishment. And he comes back a year later against Rolly Romero and absolutely lays an egg. If you guys don't know what the stuff does, don't even act like you do, because you guys are just a bunch of crock-headed idiots right now, still thinking Austrian is a non-factor in what happened in the Garcia-Haney fight. Do I think Garcia could have beaten Haney without it? Yes, I think he could have. It looks worse now that after he tested positive, he lays an egg against Romero, and now we're having a whole new conversation, because from now on, for the rest of his career, if he continues to fight on, question's going to be asked, is he clean or is he not clean? Because from the Haney fight to this fight, it's 2 different stories. And he looked much different going into the weigh-in for the Romero fight than he did against Haney. I mean, everybody knows me, knows I'm not the greatest Devin Haney fan myself because of how he acts and how he carried himself after he found out about the positive drug test. But let's not act like, Ryan Garcia was going to be that overwhelming for the rest of his career. I mean, if Austrian was not a factor the way you guys say it wasn't. 2 questions. If Austrian, the PED that he tested positive for, wasn't the factor, why did he need it to be on it for the Devin Haney fight? And why did he just lay an egg out of nowhere a year later when he fought Rolly Romero? No, I don't want to hear about a 1-year layoff, because I saw George Foreman take 10 years off of his career to win a heavyweight championship. I saw Floyd Mayweather get in and out of the ring to take years for retirement purposes. He managed to be successful. Sugar Ray Leonard's been in and out of the ring. He was successful. I don't want to hear about 1-year layoffs when it comes to the excuses fanboys give Ryan Garcia, because you officially don't have a leg to stand on simply because you tested positive for the Haney fight. And when you're cleaned out, you got more than cleaned out. The drugs cleaned out of your system, and you got cleaned out by Rolly Romero. That is all you need to know about Ryan Garcia. Karma came knocking on your door. You guys are still making excuses for it. At this point, you have no room for excuses. You got your butt handed to you by Rolly Romero. Why? Because Ryan Garcia couldn't get on the Austrian. It's plain and simple. Because he couldn't get on the Austrian, he couldn't beat Rolly Romero. Plain and simple. He needed it to beat Devin Haney. He apparently needed it to beat Rolly Romero because he wasn't on it. He couldn't be on it because he tested positive 3 times. And the New York State Athletic Commission basically put the wraps on him in a minute. His 5 minutes of fame are over. Same with the fanboys who think Austrian didn't have a factor in the Haney fight. Look at the fights between Haney and Romero. Look at his appearances in between both fights. The party is over. You have no room to stand on. Karma came knocking on your door, and I'm glad I got that one wrong. And I'm damn glad I'm having the fun time of my life watching you guys make a fool of yourselves, still thinking Austrian was no factor in Ryan Garcia's fight against Devin Haney. Look at how he looked against Rolly Romero. Plain and simple. People think drugs don't do anything to you. That's all I need to know. Just watch Garcia versus Haney when he was on Osterin. Watch Garcia versus Romero when he was off the Osterin. That's what I need to know. And speaking of the idiots in the boxing community, especially morons like Ray Jackson who are stupid enough to understand this, guess there was some backlash from him and among many others about this fight with Naoya Inoue, simply because Naoya Inoue got dropped by Ramon Cardenas, and people now are trying to think he's chinny. He's only dropped twice in his career out of how many fights? And you want to call him chinny? Look, anybody can get knocked down in this sport. I mean, I've seen tough chin fighters on the floor. I mean, Julio Cesar Chavez, tough chin fighter, was decked twice. You could probably Juan Manuel Marquez, who had a great chin. He's been floored a few times, especially by guys like Manny Pacquiao. I could bring up a whole list of others. But people now are trying to call Naoya Inoue chinny after he got floored by Ramon Cardenas. I think like the second time in his last 4 fights. Just because a guy gets on the chin and gets floored doesn't make the guy chinny. I can give you some examples of some chinny fighters, going back to a guy like Tommy Morrison and even a Floyd Patterson who was chinny. But if you think one punch of Ramon Cardenas makes Naoya Inoue chinny, I question what kind of fight fan you are. Because these guys, any punch on the chin, and you can be on the floor. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you are. Shoot, as I said at a show not too long ago, Pernell Whitaker didn't have the greatest power himself, at least knockout-wise on his record. But I saw guys getting knocked out highlight reel style. That doesn't make the guys he knocked out chinny. I mean, he fought Louis Lomeli, and Louis Lomeli was undefeated, never been dropped. The perfectly placed left hand, Lomeli went down. Does it make Louis Lomeli chinny? No. We have idiots in our community, once again, drawing these idiotic conclusions, especially in the PBC community, whatever the hell these guys want to call themselves, like Ray Jackson and Matt from Brunch Boxing, the cowards those two are, who think all of a sudden that one knockdown like that makes him chinny. No, it doesn't. Maybe you could probably say, in a way, because he's fought a lot, traveled a lot, especially being in the Far East in Japan, maybe the mile is starting to get to him a little bit. I understand it. Doesn't mean he's chinny. And for the second time in his 4 fights, he hit the canvas. But, of course, he comes up and just dusts off his opponent in spectacular fashion. We have American fight fans who are just absolutely the definition of brain-fried idiots who need to live in a insane asylum wrapped up in a straitjacket so they can have their brains checked, especially Ray Jackson, who's the biggest coward out of all of this, simply because they don't get the concept of what it's like to be hit on the chin, and they don't know what it's like to feel being hit on the chin to call a fighter chinny. I mean, all because a guy like him sits in a forklift, flitting on the phone all day out there in Texas, moving those forklifts up and down, thinking he knows the sport of boxing when he really doesn't. Doesn't make him the most knowledgeable fight knower in the sport. Ray Jackson just needs to put the phone away and just stick to forklift driving because that's all he's good for. He's got the fight with Sean Porter, which I hope Porter just beats his brain so bad the guy never mentions a word about boxing ever again. But for a guy like him to make this idiotic comment that Naoya Inoue is chinny because he got floored twice in his last 4 fights and try to play whatever card he wants to play, he needs to seriously check for CTE, and he needs to be actually out of the warehouse because those fumes of that forklift he drives probably messes his brain up to where the guy can't even think straight. That's the problem with a guy like Ray Jackson who thinks because he says Naoya Inoue is chinny. Naoya Inoue is not chinny. That's the problem. It's something he doesn't understand, something the rest of the fight community doesn't understand, and it's something nobody in the fight community can comprehend because they use what they see on the highlight reel because they see it, they think that makes him chinny. Because these guys don't even have the courage to get in the ring with a guy like that and test it for themselves. That's the issue. Naoya Inoue is not a chinny fighter. Yes, he's been dropped twice in his last 5 fights. I get it. But basically, he was perfectly placed punches on the right spot. And when that happens, chances are you can wind up on the deck, regardless of the weight division, regardless of the power of the opponent. It doesn't matter. For a guy like Ray Jackson, who sits on his forklift, flipping up and down his phone, and having forklift fumes inside his brain to think that he knows that Naoya Inoue is a chinny fighter, he needs to just flat out just stick to forklift driving. Maybe after he's done, get himself checked for CTE because those forklift fumes just mess his brain up, and maybe someone can give me the results on why he thinks it, so I can find out what's wrong with the guy's brain. He's a piece of work, and no, Naoya Inoue is not chinny. He has a tough fight against MJ coming up, and to talk about him fighting Junto Natakani in Japan, I get it, maybe because of the longevity. You might see his downturn a little bit. Who knows? But, it doesn't make him chinny. And if he was chinny, he would have knocked down more times than he has been. I mean, he's only dropped twice in his last 5 fights. Doesn't make him chinny. I've seen chinny fighters. Ray Jackson hasn't seen a chinny fighter. That's a difference. I'll deal with him later. And speaking of champions, we have an all-time great coming back against a fake welterweight champion. It's the fake welterweight champion, Mario Barrios, apparently defending his title against the iconic Filipino Manny Pacquiao. Question I have about this fight is, what sense does this make? I mean, Pacquiao looked awful when he beat Keith Thurman. His biggest luck out was Keith Thurman shit the bed. Pardon my language. He's, of course, in the fight against Ugas, from about the round 4 on the rest of the way, he just got his ears boxed off, and it was basically all she wrote. And at that point, what more can you say? I mean, the guy's an all-time great. I don't know what he's going to accomplish by coming back for a fight like this. I mean, he should have stayed retired. Actually, he should have retired after he beat Keith Thurman, because it would have been the perfect way for him to end his career. But he wanted to fight Ugas. Actually, they're talking about him fighting Errol Spence, but we know Errol Spence Jr. ducked Manny Pacquiao the way he ducked Terrence Crawford for 5 years. Excuse me. But now he's going to come back after an embarrassing loss to Ugas 5 years later to fight the fake welterweight champion Mario Barrios. Now, Barrios is not the greatest household name of the division. I mean, the guy couldn't hold a candle like to Brian Norman or Boots Enos. But what is Manny Pacquiao trying to gain, trying to come back at this age? I mean, he looked awful when he fought Ugas a few years back. And even when he beat Keith Thurman, he didn't look all that great. He got off to the great start. So he locked out. He buckled down in that 10th round and had Keith Thurman looking for a toilet seat the way Keith Thurman was holding his stomach after that body punch. That's the only thing that kept him going in that fight, which I thought he should have retired after the Thurman fight, because it would have been the perfect way for him to end his career. He's still an all-time great. No one's saying he's not, but let's not act like he's going to come back and be the Manny Pacquiao we saw in the 2000s when he was running neck and neck with Floyd Mayweather for the top spot in the pound-for-pound supremacy. That's not coming back. Now, granted, no one's going to mistake Mario Barrios for the second coming of Juan Manuel Marquez or any of them guys, because he's a fake welterweight champion. But let's see what happens with this. I mean, I'd like to see Pacquiao suck it up for one last time and get rid of this guy. Maybe a better way to end his career. But given how he looked last few fights before he retired, even the loss to Jeff Horn, even though I thought he won the fight, he didn't look all that great. I don't know. It's going to be a tough ending for him. Hopefully, he'll be just fine. Luckily, he got Barrios, not Boots Enos or Brian Norman, because he would have been completely overwhelmed. Remember, the guy ducked Terrence Crawford for the longest time himself. So let's see where this one goes. Again, I would advise him to take this fight, given how he's looked in his last few fights. Should have retired after the Thurman victory, because I thought it would have been the perfect way for him to end his career. Still an iconic all-time great. But I wish Manny Pacquiao nothing but the best. And I close on, speaking of the little giants in that division, the division Manny Pacquiao started off in way back when. An all-time great made his mark. This was Eder Jofre making a move from bantamweight to featherweight in the old school 8. Because back then there was no super bantamweight, there was no junior featherweight. He went from bantamweight to featherweight, and that's what he did. And he got a decision win over a standout fighter named Jose Legra Utria 53 years ago today in his home country of Sao Paulo, Brazil. One of the premier little giants in those weight classes when you talk about the standout Eder Jofre. Aggressive fighter, always brought excitement in those divisions. Widely regarded as the greatest bantamweight to ever lace up the gloves. We consider the stature that he had, long time reign. Made the move up to fight a standout Jose Legra, who was a European champion, won the featherweight title, lost it and regained it. In his first title defense, he fought Jofre in a tough fight out there in Brazil. We consider He's going to the backyard of Eder Jofre. Jofre gets the decision win to win his second world championship. And we consider the fact that Legra was a standout fighter himself. I mean, he was no pushover. When I look at Legra's record, the guy had 129 wins himself. I mean, 49 of them by knockout. When he regained the title in the 1972, he fought Clemente Sanchez to win it after Sanchez was stripped of it. But he would lose it to Jofre in a majority decision after that fight. He had 3 more fights. The third one was Legra getting knocked out by Alexis Arguello. That tells you the type of fighter Eder Jofre was facing that night, because when you talk about stand-up fighters in those weight classes, it doesn't appeal to the American public. It appeals more to the global public, because a lot of those guys, we've seen very few American-born fighters in those weight classes. We talk about Michael Carbajal and Orlando Canizales. More on Canizales in a minute. But it was 52 years ago today in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Eder Jofre won his second world championship after a nice long run in the bantamweight division by defeating Jose Legra by a majority decision in a tougher than expected fight to win the real featherweight championship. Then we talk about Jofre and his run as the longtime bantamweight champion. I mean, he beat Eloy Sanchez to win a vacant title. A year later, he beat Piero Rollo to win the lineal championship to go with his belt. Made many successful title defenses, as many as 7 before he lost twice to a fighter named Fighting Harada out of the side of Tokyo, Japan, who was a Japanese fighter, also a standout during that time. But we talk about the all-time great bantamweights, and this division is a little deeper than you think. And I say this, if you're a global follower of the sport, I'm not talking about American follower, a global follower of the sport, this weight class that included Eder Jofre is pretty solid. I mean, Ruben Olivares was there, the widely regarded greatest Mexican fighter of all time, before guys like Salvador Sanchez and Julio Cesar Chavez came along. Carlos Zarate was in that division. We talk about Fighting Harada out of Japan, a standout during that time out of the Far East. A deep tradition in Japan back then. Fighting Harada was a very good fighter. Kid Williams was one. Vihipro Sahapram out of Thailand. And Thailand has a deep tradition of fighters who had long reigns as champions and out of that country. Of course, I mentioned earlier Orlando Canizales, probably the more modern one out of Laredo, Texas. Combined skill with will and a solid chin. Had 17 successful title defenses of a belt in that weight class before he went up to challenge for higher titles. Yoshiro Tatsuyoshi out of the Far East was another good one at a time. A fighter named Miguel Happy Laura, who had a solid reign until he lost to Raul Perez. Rafael Herrera was another one. Even a guy like, who can forget, Rafael Marquez, maybe more modern. The face first 3-4 fight series he had with Israel Vasquez in those divisions, also in that conversation. Of course, Wilfredo Gomez started his career there before he advanced to higher levels. For this division, the bantamweight division, Eder Jofre is going to stand out more than likely, widely regarded in that division. It was widely regarded in 2019 as a top 20 to 25 all-time great fighter. I mean, his run as a bantamweight champ, even the brief time at featherweight, put him in that distinction. At the time, he was the third greatest living fighter at the time, behind Roberto Duran and Ray Leonard. That should tell you the stature that Eder Jofre had when he was the champion during that time. A terrific, terrific fighter in a solid weight class. Of course, the names aren't going to be flashy at you because the bantamweight division wasn't all that great and doesn't appeal to the American public. But for the deep, especially for the foreign followers, especially Latino and the Far East, who know Fighting Harada, who was a pretty darn good one in that division, in the featherweight division out in Japan. There's some pretty darn good ones if you do some research, and I mean some very good ones. I mean, I mentioned Ruben Olivares. Let me remind you, Olivares was widely considered the greatest Mexican fighter of all time at the moment. Before we had guys like Ricardo Lopez Julio Cesar Chavez and the late Salvador Sanchez come along. That should tell you the distinction of how Eder Jofre out of Sao Paulo, Brazil, had the honor of the greatest bantamweight to ever lace him up. And the record speaks for itself. When you have the distinction of the most trusted publications as a top 20 all-time great fighter, you did something right. Eder Jofre did something right. And he added onto that legacy 52 years ago in his home country of Sao Paulo, Brazil, when he stunned Jose Legra, who was a very good fighter in his own right, had some solid wins, and gave Alexis Arguello a good fight before his career ended. Jofre beat him on a majority decision to win his second world title. And remind you again, this is from the old school 8, from bantamweight to featherweight. There was no junior bantamweight or super featherweight at the time. So that's what made Eder Jofre a premier all-time great. May he rest his soul. We wish we had more little big men to talk about like this today, but we don't, unfortunately, due to the nature of the sport. Everyone is so fixated on some of the middle and the heavier weight classes. There's deeper talent, those lighter weight classes way back when. I mean, even when the 90s had some of the good ones also. When you talk about Michael Carbajal, Humberto Chiquita Gonzalez, Ricardo Lopez, Baby Jake Matlala, who stunned Carbajal in 97. Even guys like Mark Too Sharp Johnson was another one. A fighter from Japan, Russia, I think he was Japan. I think he lived in Russia, named Yuri Arbashekov was another. Yu Mong-woo out of Korea was talked about coming to the States for an undisputed flyweight title fight with Michael Carbajal. That never materialized. We talk about the bantamweights, of course. Orlando Canizales, his brother Gabby Canizales had a brief run in that weight division. At one point, both Canizales, Orlando, and Gabby won world titles simultaneously in the same division. Gabby briefly fought out of the Kronk Gym with the late Emmanuel Stewart. That's how that division was way back in the day. I mean, nothing really stands out unless maybe the only one you could probably say that does stand out were Naoya Inoue, Bam Rodriguez, and Junto Natakani. But, they were standouts, obviously. But it was a lot deeper back then where there were some wild guys, especially that came from the States. We consider Michael Carbajal was from Arizona and Orlando Canizales was from Texas. That could get on your screen back in those days when you were watching network television on CBS or NBC, and they wowed you. And those two guys were probably the only two American born in those weight classes. Mark Johnson thrown in there also. Cincinnati had one in Tim Austin, but he fell off the rails. But that was those weight classes. You have to be like a deep, deep follower of the sport to understand the deep concept of those bantamweight and super bantamweight divisions, because they brought more skill than you thought. I mean, their names might not stand out. They might not be recognizable to the American public because they're so fixated on some of the heavier ones, understandably so, because some of them, of course, had the personality and the wow factor that brought you to the television screen. But those lighter weight classes from like 126 down had some darn great ones, and there were ones that actually did also. Because I'm correct, Michael Carbajal was the lightest fighter at the time to have a gate of $1 million for a fight. The first fight with Humberto Chiquita Gonzalez, which is a classic. Orlando Canizales had some good ones also. I mean, I wish I could talk more about these lighter guys, but too many people are so fixated on what goes on from the featherweight up. But there's a lot of great ones out there. I mean, none of them were American. Obviously, you have to be deep, hardcore to the root boxing followers to follow it. But there are a lot of great ones. I remember a lot of them reading about them on the net when it started to really break through. Reading about them in the newspapers, read about them in the boxing almanacs that used to bust out all over the bookstores way back when. There's a lot of great ones south of the 135-pound division. Just you have to dig deeper and understand it. That's why I brought up Eder Jofre today, because we talk about the bantamweight division. He's head and shoulders above everybody else. A lot of great ones that came out, but it was Eder Jofre out of Sao Paulo, Brazil. Head and shoulders. 2-division world champ. Got a second world title today when he beat Jose Legra in his home country of Brazil. Oh, I can go on and on about how these guys are, because there's a lot of good ones we could go to, especially in all sports. Not just boxing, but in all sports. There's some athletes, people get fixated on the wow guys. Maybe follow more blue-collar stories as opposed to some of the, we want to call this white collar stories, because the ones that work hard that don't make the sports waves or the news waves or whatever, or the podcast waves or whatever, they're the ones that deserve at least some credibility for getting to that point, and they're always swept under the rug. I could point to a whole lot of them. I'll do that in another show another time. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. I hope everyone has themselves a wonderful rest of the 6th of May 2025. And as I always say to close shows out, make self-care your number one priority in life. If you take care of yourself first, good things will follow. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else in life matters. Always take care of yourself first. Focus on you before anything and anybody else. Have a good rest of the night. Enjoy it. Take care of yourselves, and God bless.